Good frickin' morning, mid-morning, noon, afternoon, night, day, wherever you may be, Frasier has what you need. We've got fantasy, we've got sci-fi, we've got steampunk, we've got historical, we've even got non-fiction and poetry. Frasier's got it, prices are cheap, and the banter is witty. Hey, guess what you get when you add Tolkien and syrup? Aragon! Theme! Intro! Slideshow! Jumping around frames instantaneously like that is exhausting. Now that that's out of the way, let's get down to business. As most people are aware, J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings probably had a hand in the inspiration for Christopher Paolini's Aragon series, considering that some of their facets are functionally identical. They are not. Oh, they are too. You're making unfounded generalities and broad exaggerations. But seriously, one of the few things that separates these two besides writing styles and the further inclusion of dragons is these. Yes, where J.R.R. Tolkien was lucky enough to get 3 stellar movies attached to his name, the Hobbit movies discounted, Christopher Paolini has to live with the same pain as Rick Riordan does, with an awful movie attached to his name. But what exactly happened to turn these seminal teenage reads into rage-quitting movies? Let us explore. Da-da-da-da-da-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. I don't really think that whole game theory intro knockoff is going to go down as well as you think it is. Now, the Inheritance Saga, as Aragorn, Eldis, Brisingr, and Inheritance are collectively known, was supposed to end just after Eldis, with Brisingr. It actually said in the back of the book that will conclude the Inheritance trilogy. But then the NSA, or National Syndicate of Authors, decided they were having way too much fun playing this game, and so Christopher Paolini would have to write another book. Christopher Paolini subverted to his master side instead of the public, had Catherine subjected to the Rozak tortures so that Aragorn and Warren could run across the continent once again to rescue somebody, and that way he would have to end with book 4. Yeah, okay, I'll buy that. But then Inheritance was released 3 years late! Whatever, I don't have time to get angry about that. But Davis Entertainment decided they couldn't wait for Inheritance to come out, or even Brisingr, as I remember correctly. They had to capitalize now. And so at the tail end of 2006, they released Aragon, the full-length feature film, as they probably described it because it was a British production. You know how they talk. Since this came out at the tail end of 2006, that probably means that by the time me and my 5th grade friends got a hold of it in 2007 on DVD and watched it at 2 o'clock in the morning, we were probably about 10 years old. God, that was such a waste of my time. Anybody remember how terrible that movie was? I tell you, I can't even remember specific, except I know every time I look back on that night at John's house, all I can feel is the chill down my spine and the sour taste in the back of my throat, which probably has nothing to do with the beer we filched from his parents' cellar. Anyways! The movie was indeed a flop, as you can tell just by looking at the cast when it comes up on the Google sidebar. John Malkovich is Galbatorix. There's no Galbatorix in the first book. He's mentioned, but he's not there. That's how you know you did badly, because you didn't pay attention to what was actually in the book. And who are these directors that think that's okay? I mean, who is doing this? Huh. That's really interesting. Here's what we're gonna do. I speak, of course, in this particular instance, of Chris Columbus, no relation to the rapist Spaniard, who directed that awful, awful movie Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. Know what else he directed? Home Alone. That's what we're dealing with. Nothing in that movie has to do with the book! Didn't you guys watch JonTron? Watch his videos about the Titanic video games produced by those Chinese companies. Those video games are about as relevant to Titanic as that movie is to Rick Riordan's novel. Why even try to pass it off as Rick Riordan's The Lightning Thief if you're going to do that to it? Why not just change the name of the main characters and call it your own personal Greek-influenced kid-friendly novel? Because if you just changed the names, no one would have recognized that as having anything to do with the book they love as a 10-year-old. But no, we've got to get rich off sloppy directing, poor screenwriting, and ripping off what we already know is famous. But you know what really grinds my gears? Overlooking the unholy perversions upon the balance of nature practiced by directors on movies like Rick Riordan's The Lightning Thief, what really gets me is that they had Logan Lerman play Percy Jackson. This Logan Lerman. Logan, I loved you, but now you're on my hit list. I don't know what people like Lerman are thinking when they attach themselves to terrible movies like this. Do they not read the script before they produce it? Do they not read the novel it was based on? Well, I hope Logan Lerman actually read Perks of Being a Wallflower, or at least went to watch himself in film, because that book and that movie are some fantastic things. In fact, I think this might actually be one of the few times where the movie actually overshadows the book. Now, all you haters out there, don't get me wrong, I really like the book. Sometimes the way that people write it as a diary can be a little overdone in the YA section, but I think that Chobsby actually does it really well because that lends itself to the direct characterization that you would expect from an introvert who has a penchant for writing. It's slow and it's fast, it's poetic, it's tragic, exactly like real life appears to a teenager or anybody at that age. I really like this book. But as history shows us, a good novel does not a good movie make. There is but one reason why this was not a flop between page and projector. In the early days of creation, John Hughes, screenwriter for Ferris Bueller's Day Off and 16 Candles, as well as dozens of other films, was working on his own adapted screenplay for Perks of Being a Wallflower. It didn't include any of the cast that it includes today, and was supposed to be a much darker comedy than the already sometimes maudlin film came out to be. Luckily, fate played its hand, and in the midst of this, John Hughes died. God bless! Now, I'm not happy that John Hughes is dead. However, for the sake of Stephen Chbosky's novel, I am happy that he is no longer around to make another Lightning Thief out of that movie. Rest in peace. With Hughes no longer working on a screenplay, Mr. Mudd Productions, the very same that made Juno... Juno. You can never look at Inception the same way again after watching that chick flick. I don't think it was Michael Cera that got Ariadne knocked up. I think it was Don Juan. These people hired Chbosky, the actual author of Perks of Being a Wallflower, to write an adapted screenplay for the big screen. He did so, Summit bought it, the characters we all know and love were chosen, and thus an amazing film was produced. So the real reason the movie was so good was it preserved the original author, kept him around to write the adapted screenplay, and thus he made sure that everything we know and love stayed in the movie and nothing ridiculous got added. Man, why can't everybody else do that? I mean, really, it's not hard to figure out. But while we're at it, let's talk about something altogether more esoteric. That word you're using, I do not think it means what you think it means. Oh yeah? Well, why don't you look it up?
Let's see here, designed for or only understood by the initiated, private or secret.
Oh. Yeah, I think I was looking more for erotic or racy, but hey, it could be for only the initiative that was the furry initiative. That's right, we're talking about Wicked by Gregory Maudlin. Maudlin. Man, this book. You can't let your 12-year-old read this book unless you live in Kentucky, in which case it's already a daily part of your life, but you can take your 12-year-old to go see this. I speak, of course, of the Broadway sensation Wicked by Winnie Holzman, which I will find absolutely no fault with because it is amazing in every asset.
You mean facet?
Man, shut up, will ya? The book, though. Oh man, the book. Do not read If Squeamish. That's a disclaimer tag that needs to go right on there. From scat to bestiality to gruesome murder to extremely awkward, frank sex, and a plot that requires all of one's mental faculties to get their mind around of, this is truly a book for the ages. And in fact, it already is. Even if someone hasn't seen it, I guarantee you they've heard of it, especially if you live in a town with a theater big enough to have a live production of it. But again, the internationally acclaimed musical production is nothing like the book in any way. Within the first 5 minutes, which was the first 2 scenes, it had deviated completely, and continued to do so. And yet, despite the fact that the musical deviates completely from the book, it doesn't make me irrationally angry. And you're talking to the guy who watches The Chamber of Secrets, and there's that one scene that isn't supposed to be in there, and... See, it's all got to do with the spirit of characterization, retaining what the characters were about and minor plot points. Because really, if you can keep to the overall story arc, that's about 40% of the battle. Another 10% of it is keeping the humor that was or was not inherent. Everybody knows that trying to make someone like Grover as black and as funny as Chris Columbus thought he was supposed to be, that's awful. But that elusive 50% that is escaping contemporary directors is got to do with the overall characterization. It's got to do with what the people were about. You have to be able to see what was in the novel and then see it in the play, or see what was in the play and in the novel. And oddly enough, you can do both. In the same way you can do the same thing with Perks of Being a Wallflower from movie to book. That's what's important. Everyone in America has their own views of what their storybook character should look like. Personally, I never saw Harry Potter as looking like Daniel Radcliffe or that thing that's on the front illustrations of Harry Potter. But it is easy to tap in to see what the broad majority of America thinks characters in Wicked look, sound, example. But it defies definition to how you capture the spirit of a character. You can't define it. It's a creative process. It goes on inside your brain, it comes out on paper or in film or on the stage, and that's what makes artistry so unique, is taking something that was and carrying it to was not, but still is. Let me give you a concrete example, and by concrete I mean bricks. You have this lovely colonial house, straight out of Thomas Jefferson times. Red brick, white columns going up to the 3rd floor, attic, cellar, all that great stuff. Along comes one of those neo-modernist designers who feels that polished oak, wood, and birch paneling would look good on the front of a new garage extension. Who do you think you're fooling? It doesn't matter if you're an architect or not. We know that's wrong. We know it looks wrong. And we know exactly where the original idea stopped and where these add-ons began. And that's why you don't have to be a film critic to know that these movies are awful or to know that these plays are great. It's because you see where the idea merged seamlessly with creative license. That's what originality is about. Because it doesn't matter how much of an innovative thinker you are, it's already been done in some aspect or another. It doesn't matter what it is. But where a true imagination comes in is you see that thing that sets your mind aflame, whether it's Heath Ledger's performance in The Dark Knight or Van Gogh's Starry Night. It's already been done. It's going to hit you. It's going to set your imagination on fire with those dreams you have of creating something amazing, but you skip all the sweat and toil of that immense labor and get straight to the benefits. But what true talent is your ability to take that and turn it into something new despite the strong connotations you feel with it. That's what can be so difficult for poets and writers, is that most of their ideas have already been laid to paper and they'll read about it and they'll think, man, F. Scott Fitzgerald is such a good writer. I want to write a college-bound story like that that depicts the 21st century instead of the 1920s themselves. That's wonderful, but you've got to be able to work with it in your own way. That's originality. So there you have it. The next time you're watching those awful films where you just think, man, the cinematography is terrible, but what really went wrong here? Now you know what went wrong here. If we can get enough comments underneath these videos for me to do anything, I'll even sing, I'll make a video about it, because right now I'm just spitballing. This video goes out to my dad for giving me the proper idea. Until then, Sic Semper Tyrannis.